welcome.
Josh. Hey,
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Josh.
It's great to have you. Thank you. You're doing stuff that nobody else functionally in the United States is doing. First in the country to build an offshore wind project.
Yeah, so it took a long time to get here, probably about a decade or so.
10-year overnight success.
A 10-year overnight success, that's right. And so you can see some photos behind me here of the actual wind farm that's in operation now. So we're very proud of it. The Block Island project is the first offshore wind farm in the United States, but it for sure won't be the last.
What was the biggest challenge? I mean, how do you...
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is a very big picture one, which is that folks, whether regulators or utilities or just the average person, didn't know what an offshore wind farm was like in the United States. And they're very common in Europe. There are thousands of turbines in the water in Europe right now that have been operating for several decades, but it's new to the United States. And when you're taking on a project that is this massive in scale and combine it with being new to folks locally, that creates the real challenge. It's educating folks about what this is about, how it will operate, whether it will impact their lives or not.
You had a competing entity, Cape Wind up in Mass, who tried to do a project, not exactly the same, but it was a big project and hundreds of millions of dollars. Jim Gordon owned some power plants here in Rhode Island, Dennis Duffy, a well-known attorney, and those guys couldn't do it. Now they had some obstacles, Ted Kennedy and the Koch brothers. You did not have Ted Kennedy or the Koch brothers opposing you.
We did not.
But you had some opponents. How do you jump over those hurdles? I mean, this is a big project.
Yeah. So I think the real secret of the success of this project is the size of it.
Yeah.
So the Cape Wind project was designed to be well over 100 turbines.
Okay.
And the Block Island project, as you can see in this photo, is 5 turbines.
Right.
So there's a really big difference in scale, and that matters a lot. When folks on Cape Cod took a look at the Cape Wind project and saw 100 turbines, it just had a different massing effect, a different scale, different size than a much smaller project has for Block Island. So that was a real critical distinction. We made a decision strategically to start small, and then to build off of that success with a project that we hope will be a little larger and then a little larger after that. But it was really important to start at a manageable size.
What was the worst day? I mean, I'm sure you had, for all of us entrepreneurs, there's lots of awful days, and we're such optimists, we kind of forget about them. But in retrospect, over the past 10 years, what were those days where you just said, oh my God, what am I doing?
There probably were 1,000 worst days over the last 10 years. And I think, as you know, the trick is to keep plowing ahead, to plan appropriately ahead of time.
Yep.
So never count on one path as being your only path forward.
Did you ever think you were dead? Just like...
Yeah, we obviously had some struggles in the town of Narragansett with folks who were opposed to the transmission line coming through the town, and that was a challenging time for us because we really thought that what we had proposed was very reasonable and was really not going to affect folks in the town much at all, and the town would make some tax money, and we thought we had a great proposal, and folks reacted.
Win-win, right?
Exactly. Folks reacted very negatively, and in hindsight, we could have done a better job of explaining what we were proposing to the town. And that was a challenging time for us. Again, we had a backup plan. And so in business, particularly a big, complicated project like this, you always need to have a second, third, and fourth option. While you're working on option A, you're always also working just as hard on option B and C because you can't take the risk of putting all your eggs in one basket.
What have you spent to date? Is that disclosed?
Yeah, it's about a $300 million project, ballpark.
So about $60 million per...
Well, yeah, unfortunately the permitting for this project took, and all the early development stage of this project took a long time, right? We started in 2008. We didn't start building in 2015.
Yeah.
So it only took 2 years to build it, but it took, a good 5 years to get to the point where you start building it. So that's a long time, and that's not something that we want to replicate for the next project. it's reasonable for the first project.
Yeah.
But the next project, we hope to shrink that time from 5 years to 2 years.
So let's talk about these next phases. You've got a number of next phases.
That's right.
Right?
We
So
do.
let's, Rhode Island, you want to talk Rhode Island first?
Yeah, so we have, in addition to the Block Island project, another area offshore that's about 25 miles south of the Rhode Island coast. So if you were to go, let's say, to Newport and go due south about 25 to 30 miles, we have another site out there under control. That's a federal water site. The
Yep.
federal government controls it, the Department of the Interior. And we won an auction for that site a number of years ago. So it's about 256 square miles of ocean that we have the right to develop offshore wind in. It's completely separate from this Block Island site. It's about 20 miles away from that Block Island site.
What
So-
does it cost to lease 256 square miles from the federal government?
So we won that at auction for about $3 million.
That seems like a good price
Yeah,
for
it
wide
was.
open water.
And we paid, I think we pay about $500,000 a year in lease payments for that site.
Interest? You have to pay interest?
Well, so it's a lease payment. It's
Yeah.
just like any other lease payment,
That's
right?
great.
And yeah, interestingly, a new lease area was just auctioned off the coast of New York that's about half the size of our site, and that went for $42 million. So we paid $3 million a handful of years ago because, frankly, we were the only company in
Ready
the
to go.
business in
Yeah.
the U.S. And we were the only company that was willing to actually take the risk.
Do you call
put
it
the risk
shovel
dollars out
ready?
there.
Is that what you guys call it? Shovel ready?
Yeah, right. Something like that. It's
Right.
very close.
So what's the timeline on Rhode Island?
So our next project is to start building out that site, and so we want to build that site in stages, and the first stage is going to go to Long Island.
Right.
So we have a contract to supply about 15 power from 15 turbines to the Long Island Power Authority, and that will be the first phase of building out this site. That construction there will probably start around 2019 or so, and that'll be online around 2021, 22.
That's great.
So we're in full speed development phase right now. We'll be putting boats in the water this summer to study that area. So we'll have biologists and oceanographers and archaeologists and engineers offshore most of this summer studying that site.
That's great. And then you've got some permitting challenges on Long Island because you've got to get approval on,
That's right.
on that side.
That's right. We're now working with the communities on Long Island to land cables and
Right.
do things like that, and work with the utility there on Long Island. And folks are quite supportive out there. They, similar to Block Island, the eastern part of Long Island has an energy problem.
Yeah, huge.
And they've got these old diesel generators and fossil fuel generators that produce a lot of energy, but it's not an ideal way to produce power out there.
Right.
So they're looking for an alternative, and they chose wind.
Great. And are you coming in the North Fork or the South Fork?
We're going to land at the South Fork
Yeah,
of Long Island.
correct.
Exactly.
And Governor Cuomo of New York has been pretty supportive of
That's
the
right.
effort out there.
Yeah, Governor Cuomo has been hugely supportive of offshore wind and called for our contract with the Power Authority to be executed in his State of the State address a few months ago, and is asking the utilities in the state to find more and more offshore wind. So there's a big commitment in New York to offshore wind. There also is a big commitment in Massachusetts, where Governor Baker just last year signed a big piece of legislation also calling for lots of new clean energy resources.
Governor Patrick was a pretty strong proponent of offshore wind as well, correct?
Governor Patrick was, and we're really happy to have both a Republican and a Democrat locally. So
Yeah, I don't know if you
Yeah.
saw, we did a story the other last week that an arm of the Democratic Governors Association had launched an ad campaign in Rhode Island
Yeah.
to promote Governor Raimondo's education
Right.
bill. And the first scene of that ad is a picture of her with you at some ribbon cutting.
I did see that after it was issued.
Yes,
I did.
right.
I received a number of emails from folks saying, "Hey, did you know you were in this?" And
Yes.
I didn't. But,
Yeah, great.
but it's fine.
Yeah, it's an amazing
Yeah.
year. This campaign is already off and running, so we're 18 months ahead of time. We're only about 4 months past
It's
the
a
last
never-ending
election.
cycle.
It's
It's a never-ending cycle,
it's,
as we well know.
What are the challenges? Is it really an education challenge now when you go to Long Island and you're trying to talk to folks? It's about, hey, listen, this is what we did off Block Island. This is what
Right.
we're trying to do here.
Yeah, it is. Energy is a confusing topic for most people,
Right.
So you start with the fact that very few people know where the electricity comes from when they turn the light switch. They know the lights go on,
Right.
or the lights go off, and they know they get a bill every month. Beyond that, most people don't know the first thing about the energy business.
Right.
And the power sector, electricity, is one of the biggest parts of the global economy. It's a huge, huge and vital part of our civilization.
Right.
And most people know absolutely nothing about it. So it's...
including, and in fairness, many elected officials,
Yeah.
because if you're at the statewide level, you haven't been dealing with OPEC issues
Right.
and
That's right.
federal regulatory
It's very
issues and
complicated.
things like
It's
that.
very complicated. And in general, the big picture that I think many people are sort of vaguely aware of, because they pick up these stories here and there, is this notion that we're in this transformative phase in our energy sector throughout the world, and certainly in the US,
Right.
where these clean energy solutions like wind and solar are being built more and more, and some of the older technologies are no longer really being built. So coal plants are going away.
Right.
So the Brayton power plant, which many people locally are familiar with, it's that huge power plant in Somerset, Massachusetts, with the
Right.
2 huge cooling towers that you see on the horizon when you land at TF Green
That
Airport.
look like 3 Mile Island.
It looks like a nuclear power
Right.
plant. It's not. Those are
Right.
cooling towers from a big coal plant. That plant is going offline this year.
Right.
So that's the biggest power plant in southern New England.
And in fairness, most warm summers, we have a huge energy shortage in the Northeast.
Right.
And usually there's a whole complexity of taking things offline and
Exactly.
moving energy around.
So there are hundreds of power plants in New England, and there's a power grid operator that really controls which projects are online, which are offline. But the big story is that a lot of these older technologies are going away, and they're being replaced with these newer technologies. So we're in this transformative time where people need to begin understanding how energy is going to be structured going forward, and that applies to policymakers as equally as the average person, for sure.
So if natural gas isn't being piped, is what we've known in the past, and oil being imported from overseas, do we also face a challenge of sort of NIMBYism? We've got this very active,
Yeah.
This weekend was a slow weekend in Rhode Island, except for there must have been 27 protests and public meetings,
Yeah.
and there was a Trump rally and an anti-Trump rally, and Langevin had a community meeting, and on
Right.
and on and on. People's energy is at its most heightened level right now. Is that a challenge to you?
Yeah.
Is it just really
Well,
put the pressure on education?
Yeah, public acceptance is a big part of any big infrastructure project, whether you're talking about a big building or a bridge or
Right.
a power plant.
Right.
And essentially, we're building power plants, but in
Yeah.
the ocean. It is one of the long-term advantages that offshore wind has, that we can build our big power plants 30 miles offshore where no one lives.
Right.
Now, there are folks who make their living out there, for
Right.
sure. So there are fishermen, there are boaters, there are people who use the ocean. So those are the folks that we need to spend a lot of time with, making sure that we can all get along out there.
Yeah.
But we do avoid a lot of the NIMBY issues that you would get from an onshore power plant, because people don't like to see new big things built in their backyards, and that's generally true everywhere. It's especially true in a part of the country like the Northeast, where we were pretty densely populated.
Yeah.
If you were to go out into South Dakota, it's easy to find a big place for a wind farm
Right.
or gas plant or wherever it might be.
So the technology, Saul Kaplan comes in and after Peter, and Saul and I talk about disruption and
Right.
how technology is changing things,
Yeah.
et cetera. Your technology, state of the art.
Right.
In a week, it's no longer state of
Right.
the art. What's the pressure that puts on your team, your organization, to constantly
Yeah.
be at the cutting edge of building
Yeah.
the best, longest term sustainable technology, but also not be
Yeah.
the first adopter every
Yeah,
time?
that's right. I think fortunately, while there's a lot of transformation going on in the energy sector, we're a pretty slow sector
Yeah.
overall. Right?
Yeah.
We're not like personal electronics or consumer electronics, where a technology that's a month old is really old. Power plants change over the course of decades and generations, right? So that's what we're going through, this transformative time right now in energy, but it's because power plants that were built 50 years ago are now being decommissioned. And so that 50-year cycle, we're hitting it right about now,
Right.
where these coal and nuclear plants are going away. But you're right, we have to use the best technology available. And you see it, whether it's the move from onshore wind to offshore wind, from solar panels that were once really inefficient and weren't very cost effective, to solar panels that are
Right.
just proliferating because they're
Right.
becoming so cost effective. So there's a lot happening in our industry, but you're right, we're not an R&D company. We're not trying to invent a new kind of turbine. we're trying to take the best available technology and apply it in a new place.
What's the life cycle of one of those?
About 25 years. So that
25
turbine
years.
will be spinning for about 25 years. And the first offshore wind farm that was ever built was built in about 1990.
Mhm.
In this year, it's being decommissioned. It's being taken down off the coast of Denmark. So about 27 years later, the first one is finally taken out of action.
And you had a repair problem on one of them?
We did.
Yes.
We had one of the technicians left a drill bit in one of the in a generator, and the human error happens in every kind of project. So we had to fix it.
And
Yeah.
what is he now driving an Uber?
Needless to say, that individual won't be working on the Block Island wind farm again. Yeah.
That's right. As you start growing, it has a huge impact on Rhode Island, both as an energy source, but also as, this is really one of these breakthrough Rhode Island technology companies, and we don't have a lot of them. I mean, we're not Massachusetts, and we're not Austin, Texas, and we're not Silicon Valley. What's the pressure on you? You must take it seriously. Here you are, one of the leading innovators in the state, and Rhode Island took a bet on you. How
Right.
do you see this progressing, and how you can help Rhode Island grow and prosper accordingly?
Right. Well, we take being a Rhode Island-based company very seriously. I'm a Rhode Islander, a native Rhode Islander, and
Cumberland?
Cumberland Clipper.
Yeah.
And we're committed to be here in Rhode Island, and we are very confident of our long-term business plan, and aim to be one of the real leaders in the clean energy sector here in the U.S. in the coming decades. We made a very early bet on offshore wind when others weren't.
Right.
The rest of the energy sector is now waking up to offshore wind.
Right.
And a lot of folks are trying to get into this sector. And we have a really huge lead.
Yeah.
And that's to our benefit, clearly, but also to the benefit of Rhode Island, where we're headquartered and where we intend to expand over the coming years and decades.
What's the biggest thing Rhode Island could do to help you in your company grow? Are there any barriers? If I'm sure the governor is watching this live right this second, and she wants, or Stefan, and literally they're looking for cues as to what are the things that all of us can do better to make it a better, more successful company.
Yeah, we don't rely so much on what state government does, but there are some things like keeping our infrastructure up to grade.
Right.
So our port infrastructure is really important for a business like
Right.
this. So Provport and Quonset are really important assets that the state has, that not every state has them. And having those really strong assets where people can do physical work
Right. Right.
for big projects like this is really critical. So those are important investments to keep up. And things like the University of Rhode Island,
Yeah.
the School of Oceanography, that's a critical state asset as well that relates directly to the business that we're in. We turn to scientists at URI on a regular basis for the Block Island project. There aren't many times when you have to make an emergency call to a geologist, but I made it.
That's right. You've made a few of those?
I've made those.
Yeah.
So those intellectual assets and maintaining a strong base of state support for those, I think, key infrastructure assets, because they're not only relevant to our business, but in the broader sector that we're in of some people call it the blue economy.
Yeah.
So the ocean-based economies. Rhode Island has a unique place in that blue economy, and it should be investing there.
The last thing, I think you've probably been one of the best PR stories nationally for Rhode Island. A big piece in Fortune
Right.
Last week, and one night I got home from work, and I don't usually watch the evening news, but turned on the CBS Evening News at 6:30 to 7 o'clock, sort of Walter Cronkite
Right.
half hour, and I turn on the TV, and there's Jeff Grybowski on the CBS Evening News. So I texted you.
Right.
And I said, "Hey, you looking good, honey." And your response was,
I didn't know I was on.
"Yeah." You're like, "Well, I didn't know that." So glad the Cumberland Clipper has kept his his roots down accordingly. Listen, I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Josh.
It really is. We've named you Company of the Year. It really is. It's a great Rhode Island success story. It is that sort of next progression of Samuel Slater and the Industrial Revolution, and enjoy watching you grow and expand and take on more successes. And so thanks very
Thanks,
much.
Josh.
All right,
Really
great to see
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.